You know those moments where something doesn't feel right, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's what it was like with my husband. At first, it was just little things. He stopped playing music while making coffee in the morning, stopped cracking dumb jokes when we were folding laundry, stopped asking what I wanted for dinner, and just started cooking whatever was fastest or nothing at all. I thought maybe it was just work stress, a tough week, a deadline, something temporary. But weeks turned into months, and the man I married, he just faded into someone else. Someone who moved through the day like a machine. Wake up, shower, work, come home, help with the kids, eat, sleep, repeat. No spark, no softness, no eye contact, no how was your day, just this quiet mechanical existence. It felt like I was living with a robot, and the worst part? He was still doing everything he was supposed to do. He paid the bills, took care of the house maintenance, did the dishes, played with the kids when needed. But it was like his soul wasn't there anymore. Like he was running on autopilot. And that broke me more than I can explain. Because how do you tell someone that even though they're right in front of you, they're not really here? I started to wonder if it was something I did. Maybe he didn't love me anymore. Maybe he regretted our life, our family, our plans. Maybe I was too much, or not enough. The silence gave my imagination too much space to run wild. Every time I'd try to talk, he'd smile faintly, kiss my forehead, and say I'm fine, just tired, just tired. I started to hate those words. They felt like a wall I couldn't climb over. I didn't want to nag. I didn't want to be another weight on his shoulders. But I missed him. I missed us, and I didn't know how to help, or if I even could. Our kids noticed too. Our youngest once asked, "Why doesn't Daddy laugh anymore?" I didn't even know what to say. I just smiled and changed the subject. And I remember one night lying in bed next to him, while he scrolled silently on his phone, the glow of the screen on his face, and thinking, we're supposed to be in this together. Why does it feel like I'm alone? That was the night I decided something had to change. He might have turned into a robot to survive the pressure, but I wasn't going to let him disappear completely. I didn't know how I'd reach him, but I had to try, because I still believed the man I loved was in there, somewhere, and I was going to fight to bring him back. It's a strange thing, feeling like a stranger in your own marriage, not because of distance, not because of a fight, but because the person you share a life with slowly begins to disappear, not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, like they're fading behind a wall you can't see through. That's what it felt like every day, with my husband. I knew his schedule down to the minute. I knew what shirt he'd grab off the hanger, what toothpaste he used, when he'd start the car, but I didn't know him anymore. Not really. His presence was predictable, but his spirit, the warmth, the laughter, the spark that used to light up a room, it was gone, and I missed it more than I ever thought I could. I missed how he used to walk through the door and pick the kids up like they were weightless, spinning them around until they squealed with laughter. I missed how he used to randomly text me photos of sunsets he saw during lunch breaks, just because he thought I'd like them. I missed his stories, his ideas, his dreams. I missed the way we used to talk like best friends, about nothing and everything at the same time. Now it was just logistics, bills, groceries, appointments, who's picking up who, what time dinner would be ready. We were surviving, but we weren't living, and I'll be honest, a part of me started to resent it. Not because he stopped doing the chores, not because he wasn't helping with the kids, but because he wasn't himself. And I couldn't shake this sinking fear. What if this is just who he is now? What if the man I fell in love with is never coming back? It made me feel guilty, having those thoughts. Like I was being selfish for wanting more. He was doing everything right, wasn't he? He wasn't cruel, he wasn't distant on purpose. He was just exhausted. I could see it in the way he rubbed his eyes after work, the way he sighed when he thought no one was listening. He wasn't angry. He was hurting, but I didn't know how to talk to him about it. Every time I got close to bringing it up, I'd back down. I was scared he'd shut down even more. Scared he'd feel ashamed. Scared he'd brush it off, and I'd be left feeling even more alone. So instead, I just kept going. I carried the quiet grief of watching someone you love disappear, and not knowing how to bring them back. I kept telling myself, maybe it was a phase. Maybe things would go back to normal. Maybe he'd snap out of it. But deep down I knew this wasn't going away on its own. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a good night's sleep, or a weekend off. This was something deeper, something heavier. And if I didn't say something soon, I was afraid I'd lose him for good. It's the quiet moments that cut the deepest. When the house is still, the kids are asleep, the dishes are done, and there's nothing left to distract you from the weight in your chest. That's when the ache crept in, the kind that doesn't scream, but lingers, follows you from room to room like a shadow you can't shake. I'd sit on the couch beside him while he stared blankly at the TV, pretending to follow a show he wasn't even watching. His eyes looked empty, not sad, not angry, just blank, like he was somewhere else entirely. And I'd stare at him, silently begging him to look at me, to say something real, to tell me what was going on behind those tired eyes. But he never did. He'd smile if I asked him a question. He'd nod if I made a joke. He still said I love you before bed, but it all felt hollow, like he was going through the motions, just to keep the machine running. Just enough to avoid concern, but never enough to feel present. It broke my heart in the kind of way you don't even know how to talk about. Because how do you explain missing someone who's still right there in front of you? And I know people might say, why didn't you just ask? Why not just talk to him? But it's not that simple, when the person you're trying to reach has locked themselves behind a wall of silence and self-protection. I wasn't afraid of what he'd say. I was afraid he wouldn't say anything. Because that would have confirmed my worst fear, that he was already gone, and I was just holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. And still, I couldn't let go. So I started watching for signs, clues, anything. I noticed how he started chewing gum constantly. At first I thought it was just a habit. But then I realized he'd pop a piece in his mouth after sitting alone in the bathroom for too long. One time, I walked by and heard him gagging. I waited outside the door, frozen, not wanting to startle him. When he came out, his eyes were red, and he forced a smile, said he had a headache. But I knew something was deeply wrong. It was like watching someone silently drown, and they're waving you off, pretending they're swimming. I started writing about it, just for myself, trying to untangle my thoughts. I didn't even plan on sharing it. But the more I wrote, the more I realized how lonely I felt, how helpless, how scared. So one night, when the house was quiet, I posted it online. I didn't expect anyone to read it. I just needed to feel like I wasn't losing my mind. Like maybe someone out there had felt this way too. I never imagined that post would be the thing that finally cracked something open. But it did, and everything that happened next changed everything. There are moments in life that you don't plan for, but they come anyway. Moments that either break you or force you to finally see things clearly. That night was one of those moments. I could feel it building, like a quiet storm just beneath the surface. All those weeks of watching my husband slip further away, of silently pleading for him to talk to me, to open up, to just be there. It finally reached its breaking point. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't let it go on any longer. It was a Thursday evening, and he came home late, like usual. He was tired. I could see it in his eyes. His face looked strained, pale. He didn't even kiss me when he walked through the door. Not the usual peck on the cheek. Not the hug where he'd pull me in and hold me for a second longer than necessary, just to remind me that we were us. No, this time he just went straight to the kitchen, grabbed a sandwich, and sat down at the table in silence. It hit me all at once. This wasn't just stress. This wasn't just work. Something was breaking inside of him, and I was losing him. And I couldn't pretend I didn't see it anymore. So I did the one thing I'd been avoiding for so long. I asked him about it. I didn't have some fancy, rehearsed speech prepared. I didn't know what to say exactly. All I knew was that I needed him to hear me, and I needed him to feel me. I took a deep breath, sat down next to him, and I just said, "We need to talk." His shoulders tensed, like he already knew where this was going. But he didn't say anything. didn't protest. He just stared at his sandwich and nodded, waiting for me to say something. "Something's not right," I said quietly. "You've been different, and I don't know what's happening, but I can't just sit here and pretend it's okay anymore. I miss you. I need you. I need to know what's going on inside your head." He didn't respond immediately. He kept staring at the table, chewing his food in silence. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I thought maybe he was just going to brush me off, maybe just tell me it was nothing, like he had so many times before. But then, he broke. He set his sandwich down and slowly looked up at me, eyes glassy. But this time, there was something different in them. Something raw, something human. And then it came. The flood of words I had been waiting for. "I'm drowning," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been drowning for months, and I didn't know how to ask for help. I thought if I just kept going, kept doing what I was supposed to do, everything would be okay. But it's not. I don't know how to keep up with everything anymore. I don't know how to carry all of this. And I'm scared. I'm scared that if I tell you everything, you won't love me anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could barely breathe for a second, just trying to process what he was saying. All this time, I'd thought he was pulling away, because he didn't care anymore. But it wasn't that at all. It was because he was afraid. Afraid that I'd stop seeing him as the man I once admired. The man who could protect and provide. The man who I thought had everything together. But hearing him say that, hearing him finally admit that he was terrified, that he felt like he was drowning, made everything so much clearer. And in that moment, I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who is carrying a burden that heavy, but hasn't been able to let anyone help? All I could do was hold him. I wrapped my arms around him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt him let go. He cried that night. I couldn't remember the last time I saw him like that. It wasn't a soft sob either. It was deep, raw, and painful. Like every bit of hurt he'd been bottling up for months, came rushing out all at once. I held him tight, not knowing what else to do, but just be there. I wanted to tell him that everything was going to be okay, that this was the first step toward fixing it. But I knew those words wouldn't mean anything yet. He needed to feel like he wasn't alone in this struggle. He pulled away after a while, wiping his eyes. There was still a little tremor in his voice when he spoke again. "I don't know how to explain this," he started, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. "But it's like everything is just too much. I'm supposed to be the strong one, the one who holds it all together. But I can't keep doing it. I don't know how to keep up anymore. And I thought if I just pushed through it, if I just did my job and kept going, maybe it would get better. But it never did." I sat there, stunned, letting his words sink in. It was so easy to look at him and assume that he was just a bit distant or tired. But I never thought about the immense weight he was carrying. He wasn't just dealing with the usual stress of life. He was drowning in the responsibility of being the provider, the protector, the everything. And he didn't feel like he could tell anyone, not even me, the person who was supposed to be his partner through it all. He looked at me, his eyes so vulnerable, so uncertain. "I didn't want to burden you with all of this. I thought if I just kept pretending everything was fine, I could be the man you needed me to be. But I'm so tired of pretending, and I'm so scared. I thought if I told you, you wouldn't look at me the same. You'd stop seeing me as strong, as someone you could rely on." The words stung, not because they were harsh or mean, but because I realized how much he had internalized this need to be perfect, to be the rock, to not show weakness. All this time, I had no idea how suffocating that weight must have been for him. And I never realized that by trying to be the strong one, he was losing himself in the process. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be you. I don't love you because you're perfect. I love you because you're real, you're human, and I want to help. I need to help." His gaze softened as he looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw that glimmer of the man I married, the real man, the one who had dreams, emotions, and fears, the one who didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. "I didn't want to disappoint you," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to think I was weak. I thought if I admitted how bad it was, you wouldn't love me anymore." The realization hit me hard. How often do we hide our true selves from the people we love, out of fear that they might see us as broken or incapable? How many times do we think that being vulnerable will push someone away, when in reality, it's the thing that can bring us closer? I took his hand in mine, squeezing it tight. "I'll never stop loving you, because you're human. We're in this together, okay?" He nodded, but I could see the weight in his eyes begin to lift, just a little. The truth was finally out in the open, and it was like a burden was being shared, no longer carried alone. There was still a long way to go, but at least we were starting to move in the right direction. His words lingered in the air, thick with regret and vulnerability. As he sat there beside me, I could see the weight of his emotions still pressing down on him. He had opened up, yes, but there was still so much fear behind his eyes. The kind of fear that comes from years of thinking that showing weakness means failure. "I didn't want you to see me like this," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I told you the truth, you wouldn't respect me anymore. I thought you'd see me as less of a man." I took a deep breath, trying to absorb the depth of what he was saying. It was heartbreaking, really. Here he was, the man I married, the man I trusted, and he was sitting across from me feeling like he was less because he had emotions, because he was struggling. It hit me just how ingrained these pressures were, how deeply society had taught him that to be a man meant carrying the world on your shoulders without showing any cracks. "I don't need you to be perfect," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I don't need you to carry everything alone. I never wanted you to feel like you had to be a superhero." He looked at me, his expression confused. "But you've always relied on me. I thought that's what you needed, for me to be strong." I shook my head, taking his hands in mine, grounding him with my touch. "I do rely on you, yes, but I rely on the real you, not some image of who you think you need to be. I love you because you're human. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be here, with me." He swallowed hard, and I could see him trying to process my words, trying to untangle the knot of fear and pride that had kept him locked inside himself for so long. "But I've always been the one to protect you, to make sure everything's okay. I don't know how to be anything else. That's the problem," I said gently, not wanting to make him feel ashamed, but needing him to understand. "You've been so focused on protecting me, on holding everything together, that you've forgotten what it means to be loved for you. Not for what you can do, not for what you can provide, just for who you are, no matter what." I saw something in his eyes shift. It wasn't a huge change, but it was there, a flicker of recognition. Maybe he'd been so consumed with being the provider that he forgot about the emotional partnership we were supposed to share. Maybe he forgot that being loved doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. It requires vulnerability. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and I could almost hear him thinking, processing the idea that he didn't have to carry this weight alone, that it wasn't about being weak, it was about being human. It was about sharing the burden, not carrying it on your own. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for not letting you in sooner. I was scared." I leaned in, brushing a kiss across his forehead. "You don't have to apologize for being human. We all get scared, but you don't have to face it alone anymore. I'm here, we're in this together." For the first time in months, I saw a hint of relief in his eyes. The kind of relief you feel when you've been holding your breath for far too long, and finally, you can exhale. And as I looked at him, I realized something important. This wasn't just about fixing his stress or his burnout. This was about healing together. This was about him learning to trust me with his vulnerability, and me learning to hold space for that. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But this was the first step towards something real, something that would bring us closer, not further apart. In the quiet moments that followed, it felt like the world had paused just for us. There was no rush, no pressure, just a stillness that was oddly comforting. It wasn't the silence of distance, like it had been before. It was the silence of two people, simply being with each other. No masks, no pretenses, just the raw truth of who we were. And in that silence, something shifted inside of me too. I realized that all this time, I had been so focused on how to fix him, how to make him feel better, that I hadn't truly been listening. I hadn't been hearing the deeper struggles he was going through, because I was so wrapped up in my own fears and frustrations. I had been listening to respond, not to understand. But now, as I sat beside him, my hand in his, I finally heard him. I heard the weight of his worries, the exhaustion in his voice, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not living up to the man he thought I needed him to be. And as his words settled in my mind, I felt this deep understanding that the only way forward for both of us was to listen, really listen, without trying to solve everything right away. I don't know how to get rid of all this pressure, he said, his voice a little steadier now, but still thick with emotion. I don't know how to be the dad I want to be, the husband you need, and the man I'm supposed to be. Every day, it just feels like I'm being pulled in 100 different directions, and no matter how hard I try, I feel like I'm failing. It was painful to hear him say it, but there was also a part of me that felt so relieved, because this was the truth. The unspoken truth that had been building up for months. And it wasn't about him failing. It was about a system that had taught him to carry the weight of everything alone. It was about society's expectations of masculinity that told him he had to be strong, silent, invulnerable. I squeezed his hand, my heart aching with empathy. "You're not failing," I told him, my voice gentle but firm. "You're doing your best, but you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief, like he couldn't quite wrap his mind around the fact that it was okay to not have all the answers, to not be perfect, that it was okay to be vulnerable, that it was okay to need help. "I just don't want you to think less of me," he admitted, his voice small. "I could never think less of you," I said, my heart swelling with love for him in that moment. "I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be you. I need you to trust me with everything, not just the good stuff but the hard stuff too. We're in this together, okay? And I'm listening now. I'm really listening. And I meant it. I wasn't just waiting for my turn to speak. I wasn't just trying to fix things. I was there to hold space for him, to hear his pain, his fears, his doubts. Because I knew now that this wasn't about one person carrying the weight. It was about both of us, sharing the burden, lifting each other up when the world tried to pull us down. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. The kind of hope that comes from knowing that you're not alone, that you don't have to keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. I think I can finally breathe," he said softly, his voice tinged with relief. "Thank you for listening." And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone isn't to offer solutions or advice. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply to listen, to be present without judgment, to let them know that they are seen, heard, and valued just as they are. It wasn't going to be an overnight fix. I knew that. We both knew it. Healing doesn't happen in one conversation, one night of vulnerability. It's a process, a journey. But that night, something shifted in both of us. We were no longer living in the same house, passing through each other's lives like strangers. We had connected, really connected, for the first time in a long time. The next day, we woke up early. Not to jump into the chaos of our everyday lives, but because we had something we needed to do. Something we needed to say. Something that wasn't about the weight of responsibility or keeping up appearances. "We need to take some time for us," I said, as I made my way into the kitchen, rubbing my eyes. I had been thinking about it all night, and I knew it was the right thing to do. He looked at me, a bit surprised. "What do you mean?" I sat down beside him, my coffee mug warming my hands. "I mean we need a break, just the two of us. No kids, no work, just a chance to breathe together, without all the noise." He sat back,
his brow furrowing slightly. "A vacation?" he asked, the word almost sounding foreign, after everything we'd been through. It had been so long since we'd even talked about something like that. "Yes, a vacation. A real one. A time for us to reconnect, to remember what it was like, before all the stress, before the weight of the world started to crush us. We deserve it. We need it." He was silent for a long moment, just staring at me, like he was trying to process what I was suggesting. And then, finally, he nodded. "Okay, let's do it. But only if it's just the two of us. No distractions. No work. No kids." I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Exactly, just us, like we used to do. It felt like a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. It was a commitment, a promise to ourselves that we weren't going to let the pressures of life push us further apart. We weren't going to let the burden of responsibility be the only thing that defined our relationship. We were going to take the time to nurture it, to bring the spark back. But even more than that, I realized that this wasn't just about the vacation. It wasn't just about escaping for a week to some tropical island. It was about creating space for us to be together again, to laugh together, to talk, to dream, to remember what it felt like when everything wasn't weighed down by stress and fear. It was about building a future where we didn't just survive, but where we thrived, as individuals and as a couple. We also started talking about setting aside daily time for ourselves. Daddy's time, we called it. No kids, no work, just a few hours each day where he could decompress, where he could just be. No expectations, no pressure, just time to focus on his own needs for a change. And I would support him in that, no matter what. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. And it wasn't just about the big things. It was about the little moments too. The moments where we laughed over a cup of coffee, where we shared memories from when we first met, where we reminded each other that love doesn't just come from grand gestures. It comes from the quiet, everyday moments we share together. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a glimpse of the man I had married. Not the robot, not the exhausted shell, but the person I had fallen in love with all those years ago. And I realized, as we made those plans, that the most important thing we could do was show up for each other. Every single day, even when it wasn't easy, because no matter how dark it got, no matter how heavy the load, we were in this together. And that was enough to keep going. The days that followed felt different, lighter, somehow. It wasn't that the world outside had changed. The pressures, the responsibilities, the worries, they were all still there. But there was a shift between us, a quiet understanding that we weren't just surviving anymore. We were choosing to live together, fully, with all the messy, imperfect beauty that comes with it. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, not a sudden burst of happiness, or a quick fix. It was more like the gradual unfolding of something that had been hidden beneath the surface for so long. Something real, something hopeful. The man I had been missing, the one I had been desperate to reach, was starting to come back. I noticed it in the little things first. How he started to smile more, how his shoulders weren't so hunched all the time. I noticed him laughing at our daughter's silly jokes again, rolling his eyes when our son made a mess in the kitchen. He started telling me about his day again, the good, the bad, the ridiculous moments. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and for me that was enough. The biggest change, though, was in how we talked. The walls he had built up around himself, walls of pride, of fear, of guilt, were slowly coming down. We no longer avoided the hard conversations. We didn't shy away from the tough topics, the ones that had been too painful to touch before. And I realized that this was what had been missing all along. Honesty, vulnerability, the space to be imperfect together, without judgment or fear of rejection. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, we sat on the couch, sipping our coffee in the dim light of the living room. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw it then. I saw my husband again, not the robot, not the man lost in the weight of the world, but the man I had married, the one who had dreams, who had hope, who had love to give. "Thank you," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you for letting me in, for letting me see you, for trusting me. He looked at me, his eyes softening, a small smile tugging at his lips. Thank you for not giving up on me. I don't know where I'd be if you had. And in that moment, something inside me shifted too. I had been so scared, so full of doubt, wondering if I had done something wrong, wondering if our love could survive this. But as I looked at him,